Charlie, you clearly understand the power of incentives. How do you apply this at Berkshire when designing compensation formula? The second part is for Warren, which is you once said you'd write about how we should compensate the next Berkshire CEO.
Well, I'll let Warren worry about the next CEO. But when it comes to the system, our incentive systems are different, and what they try and adapt to is the reality of each situation. And the basic rule on incentives is you get what you reward for. So if you have a dumb incentive system, you get dumb outcomes. And one of our really interesting incentive systems is at GEICO, and I'll let Warren explain it to you because we don't have a normal profits type incentive for the people at GEICO. Warren, tell them because it's really interesting.
Yeah, well, at GEICO, we have two variables, and they apply to well over 20,000 people. I think you have to be there a year, but beyond that point, anybody's been there a year or more, and I could be wrong on the exact period, is subject and understands that these two variables will determine bonus compensation. And as you go up the ladder, it has a multiplier effect. It's still the same two variables, but it gets to be larger and larger in terms of bonus compensation as a percentage of your base. But it's always significant. It's always significant. And those two variables are very simple. I care about growing the business, and I care about growing it with profitable business. So we have a grid which consists of growth in policies in force on one axis, not growth in dollars, because that's reflected by average premiums, which are outside their control, but growth in policies in force. And then on the other grid, we have the profitability of seasoned business. It costs a lot of money to put business on the books. I mean, we spend a lot of money on advertising and all of that. So the first year, any business we put on the books is going to reduce profit significantly. And I don't want people to be worried about the profit if it's going that might be impaired by growing the business fast. So profit of seasoned business, growth of policies in force. Very simple. We've used it since 1995. We put a tiny little tweak or two in for new businesses or something, but it's overwhelmingly a simple system. Everybody understands it. In February or so, it's a big day when the two variables are announced and people figure out how they come out on it. And it totally aligns the goals of the organization in terms of compensation with the goals of the owner. And that's a simple one. The interesting thing about Berkshire...
It's simple, but other people might reward something like just profits. And so the people don't take on new business that should take it on because it hurts profits. So you've got to think these things through, and of course Warren's good at that. And so is Tony Nicely.
Yeah. And just thinking about, I mean, somebody comes and says, well, you reward profits. You don't want to reward profits. I mean, alone, it'd be the dumbest thing you could do. You just quit advertising and start shrinking the business a little. And like I say, that people there know that the very top person is getting paid based on those same two variables, so that they don't think that the guys at the top have got a cushy deal compared to them and all of that. It's just a very logical system. The interesting thing, and I'll get to your second thing in the second question in a minute, but if we brought in a compensation consultant, they would start coming up with plans that would be designed for all of Berkshire and get us all pulling together.
Maybe an undertaking parlor.
Yeah.
God knows where they'd get the plan.
The idea of having a sort of a coordinated arrangement for incentive compensation across 70 or 80 businesses or whatever is just totally nuts. And yet, I would almost guarantee you that if we brought in somebody, they would be thinking in terms of some master plan and little sub-plans and all this kind of thing, and explain it with all kinds of objectives. We try to figure out what makes sense in each business we're in. There's some businesses where the top person is enormously important. There's some businesses where the business itself dominates the nature, the result. We try to design plans that make sense. In certain cases, I asked one fellow that came to work for us, or that was selling me his business. The day I met him, he came to the office, and he had a business he wanted to sell, but he also wanted to keep running it. And I made a deal with him on it, and then I said, tell me what the compensation plan should be. And he said, I thought you told me that. I said, no. I said, I don't want a guy working for me that has a plan that he thinks doesn't make sense, or that he's unhappy with, or chewing at him, or he's complaining to his wife about, or whatever it may be. You tell me what makes sense. And he told me what made sense, and it made sense. And we've been using it ever since. Never changed a word. We have so many different kinds of businesses. Some of them are very tough businesses. Some of them are very easy businesses. Some of them are capital intensive. Some of them don't take capital. You just go up and down the line, and to think that you'll have a simple formula that can be sort of stamped out for the whole place, and then with some overall stuff for corporate results on top of it, you'd be wasting a lot of money, and you'd be misdirecting incentives. So we think it through one at a time, and it seems to work out pretty well. In terms of the person that succeeds me, it's true. I have sent a memo in fact, I sent 2 memos to the board with some thoughts on that. Maybe I'll send a third one, but I don't think it would be wise to disclose exactly what's in those letters. But it's the same principle as I've just gotten through describing.
And he wanted more bad examples. A lot of the bad examples of incentives come from banking and investment banking. And if you reward somebody with some share of the profits, and the profits are being reported using accounting practices that cause profits to exist on paper that are not really happening in terms of underlying economics, then people are doing the wrong thing, and it's endangering the bank and hurting the country and everything else. And that was a major part of the cause of the great financial crisis, is that the banks were reporting a lot of income they weren't making, and the investment banks were too. The accounting allowed for a long time a lender to use as his bad debt provision his previous historical loss rate. So an idiot could make a lot of money by just making way gamier loans at high interest and accruing a lot of interest and saying, I'm not going to lose any more money on these because I didn't lose money on different loans in the past. That was insane for the accountants to allow that. And literally insane. That's not too strong a word. And yet nobody's ashamed of it. I've never met an accountant that's ashamed of it.
Another thing, possibility, is when you get the very greedy chief executive and who wants an enormous payoff for himself, and to justify it, designs a pyramid so that a whole bunch of other people down the line get overpaid in some relation, or get paid in relation to something they have no control over, just so it doesn't look like he's all by himself in terms of that fantastic payoff he's arranged for himself. There's a lot of misbehavior. You saw it in pricing of stock options. I mean, people that, I literally would hear conversations in a boardroom where they hoped they were issuing the options, at a terribly low price. Well, if you get people interested in having options issued at a terribly low price, they may even occasionally do something that might cause that. And it's certainly, what can be dumber than a company looking for a way to issue shares at the lowest price? But compensation isn't as complicated as the world will like to make it, but if you were a consultant, you'd want to make people think it's very complicated, and that only you could solve this terrible problem for them that they couldn't solve.
We want it simple and right, and we don't want it to reward what we don't want. If you have those of you with children, just imagine how your household would work if you constantly rewarded every child for the bad behavior. The house would be ungovernable in short order.